What's up, everybody? Welcome back to 1025 in Conversation. This is episode 12. I'm Jordan Walton, and today I'm bringing on a special guest, the film producer, Marc Milliard. First of all, Marc, I just want to say thank you so much for being on 1025 in Conversation, and it is awesome to have you here.
Thank you very much, Jordan. I'm honored to be here.
All right, so first off, if you could just tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'll try to employ some brevity. I could tend to ramble on about myself, and I apologize in advance. But yes, I've been working in the Canadian film and television industry for approximately. This is actually my 23rd year. I started in the year 2000, flat, like just right away, and basically I started. I'm actually a quality assurance engineer by trade, and ironically, it's what ultimately got me into the industry. But I also got my truck driving license when I was 17. I thought, I don't think I used it for about a year with a job that I had, and then I pursued the quality assurance engineering. And then I parked the license for forever. I still have the same license, and I'll get to why that's important in a moment. Um, and I was pursuing this engineering career, which, in my honest opinion, was a terrible mistake. It didn't fit my personality. It certainly didn't. I was obviously very interested in that side of things, but it's quite a boring job. And I couldn't imagine spending the last 23 years of my life doing the same thing over and over and over again. So I ultimately got fed up with my foreman and ended up picking a fight with him on site, which ultimately got me fired. Duly got me fired, and I came to Toronto to lick my wounds with my best friend from high school, David Carbert, who at the time was a fourth year student at Ryerson, which is our film and television arm, educate a school here in Toronto. So he was doing his thesis, and it was a mock commercial. We call them specs out here, and he was doing a spec as part of his thesis, and asked me to come and join him. And I thought, well, I've got nothing else happening. So, and this is back in the day when we were still shooting on film. There was only film at the time. There was no video. So I
Right.
got to operate the Sony Hi8 playback system that was recording from the film camera's tap, and it was in black and white. And I was tasked with the very important job of yelling out "rolling" when camera was up to speed. Uh, because of that particular experience, even though it was a student experience nonetheless, it had ultimately raised and lifted the veil for me. Like being able to finally see that wizard behind the curtain and understand all these departments and what actually happens behind the lens. You don't see that because we consume content and we only see this 2D image, right? So
Right.
seeing it in 3D was actually pretty remarkable. And I thought, well, what the timing is right. And David had introduced me to a production company at the time was called Black Walk Productions, the Black Walk Productions, and it turned out to be the best school I ever went to. And circling back on the truck driving license, I had been pounding the doors over there to get a job. Um, and Alex Walty was the VP at the time, and I would harass that man relentlessly to get me some work, which I think is a very important, element for anybody trying to break into the industry. Is squeaky wheels get the grease. Um, and he was like, he kept shooing me off, and then finally he just said, "Hey, do you know how to drive a truck?" Haphazardly asked me this question. I was like, "In fact, I do. I am licensed to do that," and that's what got me the job. I became I became the package truck operator with Black Walk, and from there, being a package truck operator, I got to spend time on the back of the truck and learn every single piece of gear. I had no idea what a C stand was, to a boom
Mm-hmm.
pole, to a redhead, like they call redheads, the
Right.
little tiny lamps, but. I had no idea what it was, so it was a really great crash course in understanding what that was. And of course, as the thigh bone is connected to the knee bone, we all know that the technicians, the grips and the gaffers would come to the truck and ask for gear. So I became friends with a lot of the grips and gaffers, and I got opportunities to chit chat with them for 5-10 minutes at a time sometimes, and just to pick their brains on what they did exactly and how these particular pieces of gear applied.
Mm-hmm.
Because being a package operator, you're on the back of the truck. You're not on set. You don't see anything, right? You're behind unit somewhere.
Right.
So I just got to make some friends And then from the grips and gaffers, I started making friends with them, like I said, and then I started begging for them to take me on as their third or fourth in both departments. So that led me to being a fourth electric or a fourth grip, carrying sandbags and moving the stands around, and getting the chance to finally be on set. And because I was finally on set, that allowed me to then observe the bigger picture, which is, um, all the other departments working in tandem and in unison. So that was even more inspiring. And then, of course, because I was on set, I got to rub elbows with art department. And because I rubbed elbows with art department, I started saying, "Hey, if you ever need a set dresser, let me know." I just kind of kept selling myself, or shamelessly selling myself, and that ultimately got me some attention and made some friends in the art departments, especially with art directors and production designers. And then so I became a set dresser. And then I moved into the carp world because I'm handy with my hands, so I was able to do carpentry work, and so I just kept taking every gig that came my way. This is pre-producer, of course, and I'll explain why why I think that my particular story, I think it relates to a lot of other producers. I'm sure there is many like me out there, but just as a side note, being a producer requires you to know every single department inside and
Absolutely.
out. You don't have to be a master at any one of them. You trust that whom you're hiring are the masters, but it allows you to identify all those departments, all the needs. You get to bank all these files in your brain and like, oh, that happened this time, and that so you start to amass this knowledge, and then that ultimately was shaping me for a producer, unbeknownst to me at the time. So of course I made moves in all those departments, and I even did craft service for that matter. I literally did every single department at some point. I won't say I ever was a cinematographer because that would be an absolute lie, but I got to make a lot of great friends. In fact, Jeremy Benning, if you were ever to look him up, he's one of Canada's premier directors of photography and has done all the major HBO and Amazon shows and Netflix shows that you've currently consumed. So he allowed me to come spend time with him and hang out at his apartment, and then that exposed me to more things. So, that was my first transition, was living with that director of photography, sleeping on his couch, and I was so hungry at the time that I was like, there was so many decisions I didn't understand which department would be best for me, and then because I was at Blackwalk, this was also happening in all the while at Blackwalk, and because there was an opening in production coordinating. Somebody had identified, a producer named Robert Wilson had identified that I might have some production chops of some kind, and
Yep.
because of my knowledge on what I knew, so he was kind enough to like give me my first coordinating job, which was a music video for a Canadian rap. I can't remember how. It was a long time ago, but it was a Canadian. It was our Canadian rap uh, industry, and I was lucky enough to do a video for them, and that kind of just like again just set me off into another direction, and
Yeah.
I kind of liked it. I wasn't super proficient with computers at the time, so that gave me another skill, was just learning to budget and learning how to schedule, et cetera, et cetera. So I spent some time in the production coordinating world, and then I got a job with a company called I can't remember the names. It was they're not here. They don't exist anymore. It was a small little outfit, but they had Ted Nugent. It was for their for his Crave Man DVD. So I was able to travel all of Middle America with Ted Nugent. I was a cameraman producer, and that just changed everything for me. At that point, I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I could do this. The one thing that I never spent a lot of time in doing was the production management job leading up until then. So once I had gotten into understanding the client facing side of producing, I started taking on music videos where the budgets here in Canada, back in the day, they used to be really, really big. So when I started at Blackwalk, we were talking about $200,000 to $300,000 a day in music videos. This is when music videos were important.
Yeah.
And that started, as the digital star killed the as the video star killed the film star, so to speak, and things started to change and budgets got tighter, and people were just, we didn't spend as much time on film. So I was able to do producer and PM double dipping And then I was able, so I would be technically needed on one side, and then I'd be client facing on the other side. So I was able to keep the balance there, and I've produced well over 500 music videos in my life.
Uh-huh.
And I spent so much time in music videos that it was actually hard for me to break into commercials, because there was, at the time, there was sort of like people kind of looked down their noses at anybody who was doing music videos, because
Yeah.
it wasn't it wasn't prestigious enough. But that's neither here nor there. That's obviously changed. Um, so that that was sort of where at that point I just went full steam ahead, and started pounding doors and knocking on every production company I could meet, and taking out every executive producer at those companies I could possibly lure to come out and have a bite and a drink with me, and get to know me a little bit. I was a lot more I was a lot rougher around the edges back then as opposed to I am today, just because I was young, and I was a little on the punk side, so I had a bit of a punk look. So that needed to change in order for me to conform and fit into the
Right.
uppity commercial world. And I mean that with respect, of course, but it took a little bit of personality adjustments to be able to make people feel comfortable ultimately.
Uh-huh.
And then from there, from there I just kept doing commercials, and in 2000, I did a feature in 2002 with director Alex Boothby. He's also the same guy who did all the effects, the CGI effects in The Cell with Jennifer Lopez, amongst many, many others. If you were to IMDb him, your mind would be blown. You'll probably even see my name in there at some point. Um, then, so we became roommates, and then I started just understanding the post production side a little bit more, because he was a post genius, still is a post genius. I take that back. He still is. And so that was the one component that I never really had a lot of experience with, because in production land, you hand over, well, what used to be, a tape, handing over
Mhm.
hard drives, and then at agencies in the commercial world take care of all the editing. So you don't really get to see
Yeah.
that side. I got to see that side in the music video world, because I had to take it from start to finish. So I was in the online suites, I was in the color suites, I was in the edit
Yeah.
suites. And then so I did a bunch of features, and then leading up to, I would say, about 2005 or six, I got an opportunity to uh, go back to my hometown, ironically enough, and produce a cooking show there called Fresh with Anna Olson. Anna Olson is a Canadian chef who has a great reputation, and she had a original TV show called Sugar. It was a baking show, and then she transitioned into chef lifestyle, family style type cooking.
Uh-huh.
And we shot in her home, and because we shot in her home, I got to move back to my hometown, which is Welland, Ontario, small town of 45,000 people, and live in a hotel for a year. My son took his first steps in that hotel, and from there, I thought, hey, I'm going to pursue long format, and this is where I'm going to go into. Forget all this short format stuff. It's too much. It's too difficult, and I had a family to think about at the time, so it didn't work out the way I expected. I thought that I would transition from show to show to show to show to show at the time, and it didn't happen that way. But I got lucky enough to score another TV series, which was a pinnacle in my career, I think, at the time. And looking back on it now, it was probably one of the most remarkable experiences I've ever had in production. And I'd like to come back to that point in a bit, because to help with the audience who might be pursuing this sort of career. But um, I was Chris Smith, who was Nelly Furtado's manager, asked me to come to Jamaica and live in Jamaica with him, and produce a TV show called In the Dance. And it was a TV series that was made by Jamaicans in Jamaica for Jamaicans. So it was kind of like Soul Train meets Electric Circus, which is a Canadian TV show similar to Soul Train, but
Yeah.
it involved dancing, it involved live music. It was a variety show, and we built a 4-foot set inside an abandoned grocery store, and I got to be fully immersed in the Jamaican culture, which was just absolutely amazing. I spent almost two
Yeah.
years making that show, and of course, I disconnected from Canada and my production life that I had here to pursue that TV series. So for 2 years, I was kind of like a ghost.
Mhm.
And then when I got back in the just at the beginning of 2010, or just after that, I realized that Canada was in a recession at the time,
Yeah.
and there wasn't a lot of work going around. So that was hard for me to find work. I ended up going back to truck driving for a minute because nobody was working at the time. And I
Hmm.
did that for about 6 months, and then I decided, you know what, I don't like the way this feels, and I don't want to just be forgotten. And in order to do, I
Right.
want to become, useless. I had amassed all these skills, so I
Right.
opened up
You
my own
wanted
production
to
company.
show yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry if I need, just jump in. I'm talking too
Yeah.
much. Just jump in, Jordan. Yeah.
It's cool. I was just wondering, like, when you were saying that, it's like you wanted to show yourself, you wanted to show your talent as a filmmaker, and not just go back to the average, life. Because even when you said that, like engineering and all that, that's very similar to my personal story. Like, I remember when I was in high school, like I wanted to be an engineer and rope work in robotics and all that, and I didn't really want to do that. And then I just
Mm.
started watching a bunch of movies, and this is what I want to do now. But yeah.
Mm. It's amazing how we set our goals based on what I feel the education system and our social structure tells us to go to school and get a good job,
Yeah.
right? And I think that story has been told to us time and time again, and still probably being told to most kids these days. And so, of course, that was something I wanted to do. I felt like there's no way I could just jump into the film industry and become a producer with the status and the credits that I have today. I would have never imagined that I'd be having this conversation with you. In fact, if you hadn't told me that 23 years ago, because I didn't believe I was capable, because I thought that was the hardest industry to crack, and it was for
Yeah.
very special people. And I was right about the latter part, as it is for special people, and we're pursuing that. I think those who have the drive and the determination to understand filmmaking and understand directing and understand lighting and understand how to frame and understand client facing situations when you're dealing with big brands like P&G and Nike, and like those are elite side
Yeah.
brands, like those are very, very, so I figured I didn't believe I would ever crack that nut and get inside that industry. um
Hmm.
because I wasn't formally educated. I didn't go to Ryerson. In fact, I wasn't in, I didn't spend 4 years in university learning film. I spent,
Right.
3 to 4 years at Blackwalk learning film. So I got paid to learn. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Now you mentioned about music videos, and I'm just jumping around a little bit because you kind of answered like a few of my questions, right? So when it comes to your producing music videos, you produced two music videos from one of my all-time favorite artists, and that was from The Weeknd, titled Pretty, and then his music video Live For, featuring one of my favorite rappers, Drake. And both of those songs were on his debut studio album, Kissland. I want to ask you, Mark, what was that experience like seeing at the time these two young, upcoming, artists, and then you fast forward now to 2022, and now they're the two biggest pop stars in the world. What was that like seeing that and seeing both of those projects like come together, basically?
Yeah, that's an interesting story. So, as I was segueing into prior to where we got to now, I was mentioning that I decided to start my own production company. And I started a company then called Collider Films. And I based it on the Large Hadron Collider, where we smash two great things together and something wonderful comes out of it, right? So that was sort of the tagline that we had. And I started to make a little bit of noise. Basically, I just started making my own money, and I was tired of waiting for somebody to call me and pay me to work, right? So I was like, I'm gonna go find it. So that fire that I had in my belly, because I had a small baby, I had a small boy at the time, and I was just like, I gotta make something for myself. So the music video work that I did, I attached it to Collider Films because it was still relevant to what I had done, because it was a personal reflection of me. It wasn't the company's work, but that ultimately got me connected to a production company called Pulse Films in the UK. Pulse is a massive, massive production company.
Mm-hmm.
So much mad respect for those guys, and they called me out of the blue and asked me if I would be interested in servicing their U.S. production here in Canada, because Abel or The Weeknd were in Toronto. They were in Canada, so it didn't make sense for them to travel the director and travel everybody. So their entire production team. So they flew out their director, and we got to making that music video. My first chat with Abel from the weekend was awesome. I'll tell you, I'll never forget it. He is the softest spoken person. He's very smart. Is not pretentious at all. So that made it a lot very easy. It made it really easy for me to like give that person and his team. Lamar is still is his creative director. So those two guys were
Yeah.
like, "What? How are we going to make this work?" And the director was Sam Pilling, and he's still on Pulse's website right now. So he's an awesome director. He did some great work for J. Cole. So if you ever look up Sam Pilling, you'll go down that rabbit hole pretty
Yeah.
quick.
Yeah.
And we Sam's idea was incredible. It was Abel coming home from his trip from wherever, and his coming home to his wife or girl of what type, and he knows that she's cheating on him, and he plans to shoot her dead.
Yeah.
Which is all, at the time, we're going back. I think that was like 12, 13,
I
14. It
think
was,
it
I can't
was
remember the year.
2013. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a pretty dark concept, but I was super stoked to do it. It was a couple days shoot. I got to meet them at their club, where at their headquarters, and jam on these ideas and spitballing these ideas back and forth. Really, it gets you excited because at the time, money was a factor, but it really
Mhm.
once the ideas were great and it wasn't scoped, we were able to like sell it, and they'd be like, throw more money at it, throw more money at it. And we ultimately produced Pretty, which was awesome. And funny story on that guy. When Abel is firing through the window,
Mhm.
that's a 45 Desert Eagle,
Yeah.
and it's the loudest. It's a boomstick. It's the loudest hand cannon you can imagine. So we're in an incredibly posh neighborhood. We had police presence and everything, but imagine hearing gunshots. So it wasn't long before the entire neighborhood came out and swarmed the set to make sure that nobody was injured and nobody was getting killed. And then once they knew it was a big
Yeah.
music video with a star that they had heard of, it was pretty exciting. And so that naturally segued to the next job that I did, which was with Sam Pilling as well, and
Mhm.
we with Drake, and that was cool because like Drake was just really starting to blow up then, and he was getting
Yeah.
pretty big, and so it was exciting for me. I don't get starstruck anymore, but I still get starstruck inside. I never let it show
Yeah.
on my face anymore, but inside I'm like, yeah, cool, because I get to work with artists that I like. So I think that
Yeah,
was
this was
probably
back in the day when both of them were like at that rise when they were
that's
like
right.
like Drake didn't really peak until 2015 with If You're Reading This Is Too Late. And then well, same thing with Abel. He peaked in 2015 too with Beauty Behind the Madness. So it was cool seeing both of those artists on the rise.
Yeah, interestingly enough, if I'm not mistaken, and my story's straight, and maybe we have some fact checkers listening in on this call right now, but um, they were on the same label of some kind. I think that they were like Abel. The Weekend was, I think Drake found the Weekend, or Drake, sorry,
Yeah.
the Weekend sent his mixtapes, and then Drake picked them up, and they were doing stuff. But I think something happened between the two of them where they probably recognized that they're both going to go to the stars,
Yeah.
and wanted to make room for themselves. So I think they parted ways at some point, but then they re-collaborated again on Live For. And so that was super cool. I mean, we shot all over the city. Oh, I'm so sorry. Pardon me. Cut that out. We shot all
You're
over the
good.
city. I tried to shovel down my food as fast as possible. Um, yeah, so we traveled all over the city, all over the Toronto subway system, and shot some really cool. I mean, we stole a lot of stuff. The one fun thing about music videos, I would say that we get you would often steal a lot of locations and oh, I need permission for that. I don't think so. You know what I mean? You're like, I don't think so. Okay, thank you, sir. Bye bye. Take care. Go around the corner, come back and do it anyway, right? Just because like
Yeah.
it's cool, we got to do it. Just because you say no, we're gonna find a way. Of course, I would never encourage anybody to do that and put anybody at risk. Safety is number one. It's super important. I'm making sure that everybody knows that I'm making that clear. It's super important. Don't risk safety over a cool shot. It's never worth it.
Right.
Historically, you've seen all the bad things that have happened to people as a result. But I mean, like stealing a location, it's not so bad. So that
Right.
Live For was actually shot in an abandoned soap factory for Unilever. It's still standing today. It's a standing set, but it's just this big, ginormous warehouse of type. So it was cool to shoot in there. And the director of photography for that one was Vinette Borathan, who is East Indian cinematographer here in Toronto. One of my best friends to this day. Wonderful guy. So it's great that you get. It's great to. It was just one of those experiences that I was like, if I never see Drake or Abel again, I'm okay with that because I got this under my belt and I've had, rub elbows and I got to look these guys in the eyes and speak to them as as a human being, not just as a fan of any kind. So that was super cool. And of
Oh,
course that just obviously took me into other worlds with Collider, and we've done a bunch of great things ever since. For instance, I was lucky enough to do a master class. You probably
mm,
see the master class advertisements on Facebook and Instagram, and I got to do a master class for Dead Mouse, which is a Canadian producer, and then Margaret Atwood, who is also a Canadian author. So that was super cool, and so that yeah, just to summarize, the two videos. Sorry, I digress onto something else there, but um, yeah, working with those guys was definitely a highlight of my career, and what got me there was everything that led up to that moment prior.
yeah.
So, I didn't know how I was going to get there. I didn't realize you couldn't have told me I was going to be there. But because of every step that I took in production and all the jobs that I did, and just the knowledge I amassed, ultimately led me to that moment. And that to me is not serendipitous at all. It was designed by design.
Awesome, awesome. Now, as a producer, you are the main one who essentially lives with the film. Of course, you're the one who finds the idea. You hire the screenwriter to like commission this film, hire the director, and then all that type of stuff. How, what is the process like when it comes to producing a film, and how can you tell if a script is worth producing?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jordan. I feel like in the sea of content out there that we consume, there's a lot of junk out there that still gets made. I find it strange that that turd of a movie, and I'm not going to name any in particular, but the one, whatever came in your mind right now is the one. And you wonder why, how did it get made, and what a crazy, boring concept, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That the filmmaking world is pretty unique. It's sim. It has similar values and applications that short form content has, i.e., commercials and music videos. Imagine a music video is a short movie, basically, right? So that's sort
Right.
of what got me hungry to look at music videos, to look at film, because these music videos had these short, really great stories that you could tell in 3 minutes. Um, Commercials is 30 seconds, and you forgot what you were even looking at. But the process is rather unique. There's draft 1 through 30. Oftentimes, there's 30 drafts of a script. And it usually starts with a short film. It usually starts with a short synopsis, and you're shopping around a synopsis, right? Like, hey, do you like this tagline? Do you like the log line of this film? And if so, people are like, yeah, go, yes, no, yes. And there's people in 32nd floor of whole bunch of offices that are the ones that ultimately make decisions like this to make these films. So, you sell a log line and then you go back and you develop it. And sometimes you get lucky enough to get development money. But there's a lot of work that happens prior to that. So like if let's say you had a script and before you go down the selling the log line and getting funded for development, let's say you just had a finished polished script. Well, the whoever wrote it, historically it's usually the director who's written it, but not in every case. Sometimes it's a director writer team that you'll find, and then you'll go out and you'll try to convince casting or talent agents to allow you to attach their name to the project. So, how do we get a Jordan on board? Like, I really want to work Jordan. Well, you go talk to Jordan's, his agent, and you gotta impress him with your script, and hopefully they get they get that script to Jordan, and I hope Jordan reads it. And then that usually helps spark something too, right? If that talent that there's a lot of unknown talent out there, but let's say you had a household name attached to it. Well, that helps get things going too, especially in the U.S. because it's like that's sort of like that connection opens doors to other things. So if it's just a writer, and he attaches a talent, household name to by talent, talent loves it. Well, then that'll attract a director. And then once that if you're attracting a director or a producer, you're attracting a studio. In Canada, it's a little different. So I can only speak to what I know here in Canada based on the films that I've made here. But it's
Okay.
very, very similar. They are very similar in terms of their approach, but it's just a smaller fishbowl to 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 swim in, right?
Yep.
And then then in most cases you'll be forced to either shoot a trailer. So back along years ago, we used to shoot trailers for them. So you would go and shoot, you would storyboard a trailer, and then you'd go and just shoot that trailer. So you wouldn't shoot the film; you would just shoot those scenes for the trailer, and then you'd have this proof of concept. Um, in some cases, you're encouraged to shoot a short film that it's just a snippet of the film that is character driven, so you understand
Yeah.
and fall in love with the character, and then that
Yeah.
develops the next steps too, right?
That's
In some
actually
cases, you
how
just get the
oh, sorry to cut you off. That's actually how
no, it's
Whiplash was made.
exactly
Yeah.
right. So that those stories exist because they're real, because that's exactly what happens. There's no mystery that it takes millions of dollars to produce a blockbuster film, sometimes in the hundreds of millions. And that takes a lot of investment, a lot of trust. The director
Mhm.
has to be somebody that they can trust, and it's all risk based, right? So what's happening, who's going to see it, where is it going to live? When TV was the only source of media at the time, like you were hoping to get it into theaters, and you wanted to go into theaters directly, and then you had to find a distributor, and getting deals with distributors, pre-selling the film with distributors is probably the toughest job any writer, director, producer could possibly face, because there's no proof of concept and there's no numbers behind it to back them up. So everyone's now taking a calculated risk, right? So you're looking at the distributors going, well, I'm promised to put it in 14 countries, but I can't promise it's going to make a lot of money because nobody's heard of this actor, nobody's heard of you. Okay,
Yeah.
so and then from there, there's obviously there's many more departments in the film in film production than there is in commercial production. But now you got to build that team, and
Yep.
you got to find the team that is best. You got to find the team that is in the production's best interest, right? It's not just open for everybody. You got to find the right director for Transformer movies. You got to find the right director for, rom-coms. Like
Mm.
basically the work is finding the right people for the job, and and hope for the best, really. But I think
Yeah.
from the films that I've made, um, and I've been very selective to make films with the people that I have made, because it's a really, really large endeavor, and it takes up a lot of your time. And if you're emotionally and professionally invested, not even financially at this point, you're doing a lot of work for free. You're putting a lot of time. You might be a barista during the day, but then you're at home like writing scripts, right? So all that stuff's
Yeah.
really great, but you're working 20 out of 24 hours a day. And there's no payola, so you're really you're hopeful that it's going to pay off, right?
Yep.
So I was like, I couldn't afford to make those decisions and go into that world full time, only because there aren't any studios per se here in Canada. Netflix has a home here now, and Amazon has a home here now, but there's nobody making films here. There's no film studio. There's a couple of really great Canadian film producers, namely um, Mr. Carmody. I don't know if you've ever heard of Don Carmody, but he's the godfather of film here in Canada. Like, he's brought every major U.S. production. He was the gatekeeper. So he has a production company, but it's not a production company that you would know of any kind. It was his, and he still is the godfather. And I never pursued him the way I pursued the execs or the record labels, right? So I was like, yeah, so
Right.
I needed to work now, and I needed to make money right away. So that's why I kind of went. I'm still in the short format content, because I'm free to do what I want with my spare time, and now I'm a present father, so I get to take my kids to school every day, and I get to pick them up. I get to do the things that I love when I'm not working. But the hustle to find the next job is still there. So
Yeah.
that's one thing that's never gone away. in the 23 years of doing this job, I've never stopped looking for work. So it's kind of, I mean, a lot of it's come to me, but if you don't look for it, it's not coming to you either, right? You are what you attract. So
Absolutely.
mhm.
Absolutely. And
I
you
hope I
even
answered your
also
question there. I wasn't sure.
you did, and you also answered like how do you select a director to bring on to the project, like you mentioned. Even if we go to Transformers, which I really love, it's like Steven Spielberg, who produced those movies. He kind of saw like, okay, I could see this franchise being fast paced, chaotic, and all that. So who do I think I can bring onto this project? Michael Bay. And then, all the other people like Kevin Feige. He's like, okay, for Black Panther, I want to bring in a story driven director, Ryan Coogler. So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah, you
perfect.
see that's exactly it. And I mean, and a lot of those films, especially in the US, I mean, it's a relationship industry, right? Like that's who's doing what, who's hot today, who's not hot today. It's the only downside to filmmaking really is like there's this sort of social chart of some kind to know where you
Yeah,
are
hierarchy.
on the yeah, like where are you on the popularity chart, are you, can you make this money is basically what it boils down to. And if you're a great actor and you're hot, well then you're gonna, that's why I like guys like Robert Downey Jr. and Tom Cruise. They just go from movie to movie to movie because they're at the time they were super hot, and now they're still super hot. And but those guys are going to
Absolutely.
get old and they're not going to be able to do the same movies they used to, right? So that's why you have this new flood of young actors and producers and directors. And I'm a massive horror fan. So most of the films that I've done were horror genres. So I often still think a lot about going into that world now that I'm older, and I've slowed down in terms of the hustle I need to do. So now I'm starting to focus more on like I'd like to start going into that direction and spend some time in the horror genre. I'll spend more time in the horror genre.
Perfect. Perfect. And since we've had this long spanning conversation, you've essentially answered all of my questions. But I want to ask you this one last question. This is our final question in this interview. What would you say to any up and coming filmmaker who is looking to break into the industry, whether it's in Hollywood or where you're located in Canada? What would you like to tell them when it comes to pursuing that dream and chasing that hunger?
Well, I think the best advice I can give anybody, any young filmmaker, actor, director, producer, cinematographer, if you can go there in the mind, you will go there in the body. And I know that sounds a little esoteric, but I think that if you really break that comment down, it really means that if you believe in you, and if you believe in your project, or you believe in your ability to learn a new skill, or you believe in a passion to point a camera at somebody, or rub elbows with stars, like if you believe it enough, it will become true. And I speak from the heart about that because I was terrified when I started working in the industry. I was afraid, and I'll be completely honest, and not to involve any sort of stereotypes, and not to turn it into something that, not to turn this conversation into, uh, a discussion that's irrelevant. But I was afraid that because I was a truck driver, that I'd never be able to make it. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I think that there is people have their perceptions, and I wanted people to see me through the truck license, or see me, not just see me driving a truck and be like, that's just a truck driver, right? Like I think people tend to default to those shallow observations and judgment. And so no matter what you look like, no matter what you're into, if you believe in something, especially yourself, be relentless and you'll get there.
Awesome. Awesome. And Mark, that concludes our interview. Thank you so much for being a part of this. And I'm so glad that I had this conversation with you.
Well, Jordan, I can't thank you enough for reaching out. Again, there are no coincidences in life. There are only synchronicities. At least it's my mantra, and it's something that I live by, and I've been living by it forever, and I will live by that idea forever. So the fact that the universe has allowed me to make something that you fell in love with, and then you were smart enough to go and find me, tells me that you're going there in the mind and the body.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
And
thank you very
folks,
much.
absolutely. And folks, thank you so much for watching episode 12 of 1025 in Conversation. I'm Jordan Walton, and I'll see you next time. Peace.